Alli, do you have clients that just are looking for motivation to be able to stick to their health journey, their fitness journey when the going gets tough?
Absolutely. And I'm so excited that our guest today, Dr. Sabrena Jo, who is the Senior Director of Science and Education with ACE, has three things to share with us, the three basic psychological needs that need to be met in order for us to stay motivated even when the going gets tough.
Let's give a shout out to our listener,
Miss Kim Harvey.
Thanks for supporting the podcast. Now let's dive in.
Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski. And together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
I am excited to find out more about what motivates us to make changes and what we can do to help ourselves age better. And we have Dr. Sabrena Jo here to tell us more. So let's find out. First, just tell us a little bit about you, Dr. Jo, where you're at, what you're doing, and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I live in Kansas. I live near the University of Kansas, which is near and dear to my heart because that's what provided my education. And speaking of that, I have degrees in exercise science and biomechanics. And most recently, I received a PhD in the psychology of health and physical activity. And that goes along with my passion for helping people achieve their fitness goals. And in terms of position, I work with the American Council on Exercise as their Senior Director of Science and Education. And what we do mainly there is we educate, and we are an accredited certifying body for people who want to be exercise professionals and health coaches.
You fit right in with our theme of Girls Talk Healthy Aging, because we're all about healthy aging, and we know that that is your passion. So why is physical activity important as we age?
That is important. It's an important question because physical activity is one of the few things that we can do that we have control of that has a profound effect on our experience as we age. And one thing I didn't mention was that in my PhD dissertation research, I looked at older adults and how their motivations came into play when it came to exercise and physical activity. So one of the things that my research has taught me is that being physically active, it really checks many boxes in terms of health and wellness. You can think of maybe the obvious things like strength and balance and mobility. Those things kind of come to mind when you think of being active. There's also a very strong social component that you can experience when you're being physically active with others that helps combat that loneliness that sometimes accompanies us, as we get into our older years. So many things, both physiological and psychological, that exercise and physical activity can help with as we age.
What was your finding in terms of what is the motivation? And we talked about this before we got on air, but can we just define what your definition of older adults is? Because that's pretty broad. So first of all, what is your age demographic of your research? And then what was like the biggest finding for motivation?
Yeah, so my research was conducted on people who were 50 years or older. And that's how, in my own study, that's how I defined it. That's a great question. When people ask me, what is it to be an older adult? It depends on either the research that you're looking at or the person you're asking. And so sometimes people will define being an older adult as they're just starting to get into the latter part of their 40s, because around that decade of life is when chronic disease starts to show some symptoms. So a lot of times that's an age where you're starting to think about and look at ways to help with chronic disease. But then if you look at maybe larger population studies, they define older adults as being 60 years or older. And I also think, you get your what is it, AARP card when you turn 50. So that is an association for retired persons here in the US. And so I remember getting my card when I turned 50, and I was like, oh wow, I am now an older adult. Excellent. And one of the things that really points out when you're talking about what's the definition of an older adult, what it shows you is that someone who's in their 50s is considered an older adult, and so is someone who's in their 80s. And if you think about that large swath of time, that's 30 some years, there are a lot of things that are going on in each decade of life at that point that make that catch-all term older adult such a huge heterogeneous population that you can't really say all older adults are this or that, because it's so varied.
And then now that I'm older, it's hard to identify as an older adult. Like, I think, well, an older adult, well, that's got to be like 80s.
Yeah, right.
They keep the guidepost moves every year.
Yeah,
every time we have a birthday, we're like, wait a minute, I'm not even close to being.
That's me. Yeah. Okay. And so then the second part to that question is, what did your research reveal in terms of motivation?
Yeah. So thanks for keeping me on track here. So in my research, I really framed my discussion around something called the self-determination theory. And self-determination theory is a framework that looks at a person's motivation and what motivates them to do certain tasks. And usually the tasks are around health behaviors. So whether that's starting exercise or eating healthy or taking your medicine or quitting smoking, things like that. And there's been decades of research around this theory in different types of populations. And so what I found with my research is that when an older adult has their basic psychological needs met in terms of performing a task, they are much more likely to continue doing it. So said another way, there are three basic psychological needs, which I'll define here in a moment. But when those needs are met in their environment, they have a much higher quality of motivation. Maybe you've heard of intrinsic motivation or internal motivation. When those three basic psychological needs are met, that intrinsic motivation is more likely to drive a person's desire and then, follow through with their ability to do a task. So the three basic psychological needs that I studied are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And so what that looks like in the exercise setting, for autonomy, we'll take the first one. People need to feel like they're in control of their own actions and decisions. And so what this looks like, if you're thinking about physical activity or exercise, is that you're choosing your own exercises that you enjoy, that fit your own lifestyle. And so that could be anything from dancing to hiking in nature to yoga, whatever does it for you in terms of what you enjoy. Autonomy also means that you're setting your own goals. So instead of following a generic plan or something that you might see on social media or the internet that you want to try, instead of doing that generically, you really take the time to set specific goals, making sure that they're achievable and meaningful to you. And then you set about doing that. And autonomy, lastly, can also mean that you're flexible with your scheduling. One of the biggest things that people need to understand about being physically active is that you yourself have the ability to adapt and adjust your workout as needed. When I coach people, they're often surprised to hear that we're going to try a few different things to find out what really works for them. So they might come to the coaching setting thinking, oh, this person's, my coach is going to tell me that I've got to work out 5 days a week. I've got to do weights at the gym and I've got to do cardio on the treadmill. And what they learn is that, well, that's actually not true at all. What we're going to do is we're going to build a schedule that works for what they want to do, what their body can tolerate. And here's the kicker, what they actually enjoy. So that's the autonomy piece where you're taking all that into account.
We're going to interrupt this interview for just a second because we've got something we want to make sure that you know.
If you're struggling with your health, with your fitness, if you don't know where to start or you know what to do and you're not doing it, we're here for you.
And all you need to do to get our help is to reach out to Shawna and I at our email, sapodcast23@gmail.com. And we're happy to help and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
Next is the competence. People need to feel capable and effective in what they're doing in order for them to want to continue to do it. So you can imagine the scene where perhaps you're walking into the gym for the first time and you see all these people working out, doing weights, doing the selectorized machines, they're on the cardio, and they all look like they have a plan. They all look like they know what they're doing, and you just simply don't. So you feel very incompetent or like afraid to try something because you don't even know what you're doing. So in those situations, it's nice to not only have a plan, but to start very small and gradually increase what you're doing, the workout itself, the intensity and the duration, and then celebrate small victories along the way. And you can track those victories, use a journal, you can use a fitness app, or you can get feedback from somebody perhaps that you're working out with, or a personal trainer. That's a way to kind of gauge your competence and help you know that you're being successful. And then lastly, the third thing is relatedness. And relatedness just means feeling connected to others. So that might look like finding an exercise friend or a workout buddy. But it might mean also going to a group exercise class where other people that you know are there and they're enjoying the same type of movement that you are. Either way, having that support system, whether it's friends, family, personal trainer, whatever route you take, having that important other person helps you have accountability. And it helps you share in those successes with another human being instead of just, experiencing everything on your own. So that there's that level of community and connection. So I said a lot.
Yeah.
But those are
That's
the three
great.
main things.
Yeah.
That if those three boxes are checked, my research shows, but also the evidence in previous decades shows that people will have a higher quality of motivation, and then they're more likely to stick with that task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me, I'm thinking about my clients, and Shawna, you probably are too. And I'm thinking about I have a women's training facility, and it's that very different environment than what they might get in other gym type settings and more personalized. And so I definitely am thinking about how that feeling capable is so important, and getting that feedback and having other ladies. I know at our place, that's such a big deal, is that they'll cheer each other on and say, girl, you should have seen me when I started, or it was my first day and I couldn't do this and this. You're doing great. Because we always question, like, am I okay? Am I doing good? When we're new at something. So I can totally, I'm picturing these ladies and their experience, how they would walk through those steps.
Can I just add to what you said, because kudos to you, Alli, because not every facility has that environment and that climate. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing that I researched, was that in the setting where people are exercising together and there's a leader or a manager or someone who's just creating the space for people to be, the characteristics of that leader are so important to help people feel cared for and included and a part of that community. And so, as you can imagine, common sense, the more, nurtured and cared for that people feel in an environment like that, their motivation is off the charts. Whereas the opposite is also true. If a person feels like they're not welcome, if they feel like they're competing against other people, and that the exercise coach or leader is perhaps pointing them out for not doing a good job, that type of thing, that really decreases motivation.
Yeah, well, it sounds like such common sense in terms of setting people up for success with the autonomy, competence, and relatedness. I mean,
Yeah.
once you broke it down, it's like, well, of course, because that's going to create such a positive experience. So, this is a challenge to fitness owners to be able to create that environment. But for the consumer, for them to be looking for places where they feel included, where they don't feel judged, where they feel a sense of community, and where they have someone that's going to show them or celebrate those small steps, because it is very overwhelming. I know that when, I am a longtime fitness owner and gym goer, and when I go to a new gym, it's overwhelming. I cannot.
Me too, Shawna.
I cannot imagine Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Smith that has never walked into a facility. How much
It's
courage,
very intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, how much courage that would take. So, what would
And
you?
how easily it would be to just be
Yes.
like, this is not for me. This is,
Yes.
yeah, I can't do this. This is too much. This is
Yeah.
intimidating. Yeah.
So, what would be your advice be to that person that's looking for those three elements? Because if you can find those three elements, I mean, motivation is you always have to get up and brush your teeth, even though you're not motivated. So it's kind of the same thing about going to the gym, but setting yourself up for success by feeling good along the way is great. So what would a person like, what's your advice for that person to find that fit?
Well, first I would say personalization is number one. And what I mean by that is some people may not feel comfortable or even want to go to a gym and belong to a gym. And that's okay. You can still get physical activity in without doing that. And so what I would say is this is going to sound weird, but give yourself permission to experiment and fail and then move on to the next thing. Because you simply don't know if you're going to enjoy something unless you try it.
Yeah.
And in my experience with coaching people into physical activity is we usually start with a list of things, and they look at it and they think, yeah, I like walking around my neighborhood. I like bicycling. I hate going to the gym. So we devise a plan together, and I say, okay, we're going to try this next week, and you're going to do it and you're going to report back how it felt. And sometimes they'll go and they'll try the things that they thought they wanted to do, and they realize, you know what? I hated it. I went outside to ride my bike and it was too hot, and I had to be on this narrow part of the road. I just hated it. And so then we adapt and we revise. So that's what I was going to say, is that what sounds weird is making failure acceptable and learning from it and moving on.
Yeah.
And
just because you don't like it doesn't make you a failure. It's just like, that activity is not for me. But something is, let me find it.
Yes, 100%, because our bodies are designed to move. And we know this from the evidence. We know this anecdotally. It helps us with our mental health and well-being. It helps us feel better during and after when you're doing it, if you're doing it correctly. You're not doing it, too much. But I think that as a person who works in a gym or maybe owns a gym where, fitness facilities are offered, if you can help a person feel welcome the instant they walk in the door with a smile and maybe even using their name, and maybe letting them know that you're there to offer any help right off the bat. Those kinds of things go a long way toward helping a person feel I'm welcomed in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's like the first thing that has to happen, is a person has to feel that they are welcomed and they're not going to be ridiculed or pointed out for doing something that perhaps they don't know what they're doing. They need help. So feeling that comfort level is important. So, finding something that you like, making it personal. I would say the next thing is that if you're the kind of person who enjoys being social and thrives in that type of situation, then seek that out. Because that social aspect of being physically active really goes a long way toward helping with motivation. And again, it doesn't need to mean that you have to necessarily be in a gym situation, because although that's wonderful, because there are community-wide things that you can take on, such as walking groups or hiking. Depends on the area that you live, but you'll find that if you really just start to look in your community, there are things that you can join to help you develop a new skill, or just to help you meet people and be active with them. Yeah. And that's another way to try to go about doing some experiments with physical activity.
How hard is it for someone maybe that isn't physically active and they want to get in a routine and they want it to become a habit? How hard is it for them to change a behavior and start a new habit?
Ooh, well, it depends. Humans are complex. We've probably heard the saying that it takes 21 days to make a habit.
And does it? Is that a thing?
Well, it depends. That I don't even know if I want to call it a statistic, but that saying probably comes from a study that looked at one select group of people, and so it just keeps getting repeated over time. The truth is, there are many factors that contribute to whether or not something's going to stick, and the best thing that you can do is set your environment up for success as the best you can. And so if we can look at the autonomy, competence, and relatedness of the thing, if we can look at your social support, and one of the things that I think is often left out of people's exercise goals is the whole reason that they want to do this in the first place. So wow. when I connect with people, I often ask them in our first session, we kind of have a goal setting session, but before we do that, I want to understand what their values are and why they're even doing this. Because I get a range of statements saying, well, I want to do this because my doctor told me that I need to be more physically active. That's a perfectly fine goal. However, that is different than wanting to be physically active because you want to be able to pick up your grandkids and, go rollerblading with them or whatever it is that you're doing. That's different also.
Or get down on the floor and be able to play with a grandkid. That's one that I know I hear a lot.
Exactly. Rollerblading. Where did that come from? That's me in the 90s, I think. But anyway,
it's coming back.
Hey, that's a big goal. I'm a little terrified of that, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. I don't know if I would be doing that at this age, but anyway, but if you want to do that, more power to you. And that's also very different than some sport related or competition related goal, like, maybe a 5K or something. So, understanding what it is that you're trying to get out of being physically active and having a value system around it will help drive you and motivate you to continue to do it on the days when you don't really want to. Because let's face it, being physically active and doing it consistently requires a level of effort that sometimes we just don't have or feel like we have. If it's a rough day, if it's a trying time of the month, if things are getting a little stressful at work or at home, typically the first thing that gets asked is time for yourself to be physically active. And it's a shame, because what I help my clients understand, and they see over time when they get a chance to experience it, is if they remain consistent when life gets hectic, it actually helps. It helps with stress levels. It helps with sleep. And it just helps in that feeling of accomplishment and competence.
And I find that, and I don't know if you've dealt with this in your work, but some clients feel like that they experienced obstacles at a level that maybe other people don't, like that it's just harder for them. Like someone may think that because I'm a fitness person, that it's just easy for me, that there's no, or that Shawna, just has done this for years and that there are no obstacles. And now I'm new, or I've tried this so many times and I've never been able to stick with it. And so how can we talk a little bit about obstacles and how common those are, and then just how we can deal with those? Can you speak to that?
Very good point, because we all experience the obstacle, but the long-time exerciser still finds motivation to go exercise. How does that happen? How does the beginner get to be that person?
Yeah.
One of the ways that we can help people with that challenge is to help them really experience, really feel in their bodies the benefits of exercising, the immediate benefits. And a lot of times that has to do with positive mood, decreased anxiety, decreased stress. Because when someone is getting into physical activity, many times you'll hear the goal and the motivation is to lose weight, look better, and that, so on and so forth. Those changes, in my opinion, and also borne out by the evidence, may or may not happen for you.
Mm-hmm.
You may or may not achieve the level of body composition that you're going for. And so we have to be realistic. We have to coach people, help them be realistic about what they can expect in terms of aesthetics, physiology. But what I can help people see right away and within the very first exercise session, provided that it's not, provided that it's done wisely, within that very first exercise session, we can point out and talk about the ways in which they feel immediately after. And usually it's very positive.
And I think that's the benefit of a good coach, to be pointing out these benefits that often the consumer is overlooking, because they're looking for something like a 5K time, or a number on a scale, or how I'm going to look in a bikini. So they've got their eye way, way in front, which may or may not ever come. And so then they miss the whole thing that's in front of them. Like, wow, don't you feel energized? Are you sleeping better? Like, how are you moving? And oftentimes those are the things that I'm encouraging with my clients, because those are the things that keep you motivated, because they're immediate. But we have to point them out. So thank you.
And knowledge too, like educating clients about, this exercise is going to help your posture. Here's a good stretch that's going to, because a lot of times they're not even thinking about their posture. And so, you might point out like, there's I'm seeing some rounding and some curvature. I know that's one of the things that seems to be a new motivator that the client might not come in with. But then when they realize or recognize how tight they are when they go to do a certain stretch, they're like, oh my gosh. Or when they get up off the floor on their right leg and it's easier, and they go to try to do it on their left, and they never realized that they had a huge imbalance from one side to the other. Those things become new kind of ahas along the journey, and become very big motivators for clients.
I want to go back to when you were talking about personalization, and what I find quite frustrating, and I've probably been guilty of it myself over the years, and I'm trying to be much more sensitive about it, is just shoehorning people into well, this is what you must do. You must be strength training twice a week. You must be getting sprint training or high intensity interval training or this many steps, or, and it's just creates this barrier to entry that so many people are probably just thinking, oh, to heck with it. I can't even be bothered. I can't do any of that. And so we need to be more accepting of like anything that you're doing is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. We've got these public guidelines and recommendations for, healthy adults, where you're wanting to get the either 75 minutes of high intensity or 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise every week, plus 2 sessions of resistance training, plus flexibility and neuromotor exercise, right? And
that's like, whoa, for somebody new. Like, what? I don't even know what all that is, much less how do I do it?
Exactly. And in an ideal world, we would all be doing that.
Correct. Yeah.
But how are we living in an ideal world? I don't know about you.
No,
I'm
not living in an ideal world, apparently. I'm not doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Consistently.
So it's a lot. So to your point, I think a good coach will help a person not only understand what it means to incorporate those public health recommendations into their weekly routine, but I think a good coach will also understand where the person is currently, and how to move them, just nudge them ever so slightly toward the ideal.
Yeah.
Knowing that we may never get there, but you know what? That's okay. Because every minute that you spend moving versus sitting on the couch, that's going to help your cardiometabolic health. It's going to help your mental health. So many things are captured in daily movement, regardless of what it looks like. Yeah. I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed and they miss the point.
Yeah. And I also think we need to kind of uncouple that we exercise to look a certain way. That is just, if you want to get in a bikini, you better work out. It's like, that's going to help, but nutrition has a big part of that. And we exercise no matter how we want to look. We exercise for the benefits of exercise. And one of the benefits is probably improved body composition, but not always and not for all. And so if we're only exercising for aesthetics, every time we look in the mirror, our motivation just might tank. So we need to uncouple we exercise for aesthetics. It's right.
I talked to this morning a client about, let's look at what you're going to build and not what you're wanting to lose.
Yeah.
Let's look at like building good tissue, building the good stuff so that you have better balance, so that you're, working on your mobility, working on your posture, because there is so much of a focus, and have been, because we've been in this industry a minute. I know Shawna and I have, and the focus on aesthetics is still the number one thing that and it doesn't matter the age of the client. That's one thing that I've definitely, because I work with all ages, and that's, we as gals, we are very worried about our aesthetics. I do think that the needle does move at some point, where not necessarily, not that we don't become interested in our aesthetics, but the health kind of starts weighing on us a little bit more. But I still find, even so, and I do have some clients that come, they're like, and usually these are your older, would be considered older clients that say, I just want to be healthy, or I want to be able to get on the floor to play with my grandkids. But even then, there's still that strong push for, I want to look like I did in my 20s, even though I'm in my 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 80s and 90s did not do us any favors in that respect. We're still trying to, like you said, I like that word, uncouple the aesthetics from the exercise, because when I started in like the 80s and 90s, it was all about exercising to burn calories. And what we know about exercise and calories is that you can't possibly out exercise your diet. So I think also, like, I agree with you, we're starting to come out of that a little bit, but then we get hit with the social media, especially for the younger people, with the filters and the unrealistic expectations, and it just makes it so much worse. So
Yeah.
I applaud anyone who helps coach people to understand all of the benefits of exercise that have nothing to do with weight
Yeah.
or appearance, honestly.
Correct. Yeah. And it is a big job.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
Amen. Preach, Shawna. Yes.
and unfortunately, I mean, I think men are close behind women and getting closer to where women are just so self judgment, like everything is, I'm not good enough, because you're holding that, the ideal in your hand with what's being presented on social media, which also isn't real. And so we just have to be reminded and and remind ourselves that we are exercising because it's for our health and it feels good, and we may not ever have looked this way, we may not ever look that way in the future, but that's okay, and we need to be okay with that. We need to just be okay with ourselves, and that's a big ask.
It is. There's a lot of pressure to change ourselves all the time, everywhere you look. So
Yeah.
that's why I love hearing from women like you who are creating these spaces where people can come together and not focus on that. They just focus on moving their bodies and feeling good and all the benefits associated with that.
Yeah. If you had a wish for our listeners today, what would it be?
I think it would be, as you're approaching your exercise goals, to think about consistency over perfection.
Love it.
Yeah, but in a nutshell, just keep moving.
Yeah. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah. I hope perfection's never the goal, but I know we get up in our heads about it, but yeah, just keep moving. And every time you do move, you get a little better.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Alli?
Mine would be to seek and find that place that provides you comfort, and don't give up on the first time you've tried, or maybe you've tried in the past, so you've given up on it, but don't give up on it. Try again. Do it. Go for it again, and keep going till you find the right group.
I really liked what you talked about failure. Be willing to try something and decide, well, that's not for me, and be reminded that you are not the failure, that activity might have been a fail for you, but there is something out there for you. So don't feel like you have to shoehorn yourself into the ideal program. It's not ideal if it doesn't fit for you.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback. If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.